Now this is the ultimate in football.
I remember Tubby Roberts took me apart in the 39 grand final. When I got home, Dulcie says to me, I think you met your match today. So I thumped her one.
I'm the president of this club, Laurie, and if I've got an opinion to express, I'll express it.
She apologised later, but by then the damage was done.
There are a lot of legitimate champions in this club, Parker, and all we got for joining was a Guernsey and a pat on the back.
You chase a lump of pigskin around a muddy ground as if your life depended on it, and when you finally get it, you kick it to buggery and then go chasing it again. Football shits me.
David Williamson's one of those writers who, with each play, and he's written a huge lot of successful plays, he analyses like a different aspect of Australian society. Like, you know, he gets stuck into the law and politics and all sorts of things. And in this one, it was the machinations behind sporting figures. So he took something like a football club, which people don't know an awful lot about, and ruthlessly sort of cross-sectioned what it is that makes these things tick.
What David was saying is, look, there is this culture of the club and it being representative of the people of this area and district, and you're a part of it. And that is becoming diluted, torn apart by the exigencies of business. And it's becoming a business and not a sport.
The power play and the money and the big contracts started to happen. And yeah, it was a changing scene in football.
Win at all costs. The understanding that the team is the most important thing.
I love this club, and I love the game.
The club is the most important thing. All of that's going on out front with the players, and at the same time, at the level of management, it's not the most important thing at all. The most important thing is some sort of financial success.
That it's really not about football in the sense that it is about councils and committees and personalities.
You're aware, as I was when I first saw the play, of the amazing backstage knifing of one another, of the politicking, the shenanigans that's going on. And it's just, I thought, a fascinating insight into that world. I knew nothing about it.
I didn't know anything about this, the tribalism that exists in Melbourne for Australian rules, and particularly Collingwood. So it was all new to me. I learned on the job, as it were. I learned about the club and how true to fact it really was.
In football clubs, there's always politics happening. There's always backroom chatter, innuendo, stories coming about certain people.
Tommy Hafey always reminded us about, if something was in the paper and that, he always reminded us, look, our job's on the ground and let the administrators take care of it off the ground.
The range of characters involved in the knife wielding and the background of the club, I thought they were a fascinating bunch.
The coach thinks he's the most important.
I've been around this place 22 years, and I am the coach of this bloody club, not the office boy.
Jerry's sure that he's the most important.
But I happen to be the best football administrator in the country.
Jock's been there longer than any of them.
I played 282 games for this club, and every time I ran out onto that ground, I felt as honoured to be out there wearing the club colours as I did the
Calm
very first
down,
time.
Jock.
And Graham Kennedy's character, of course, who is a lovely character, is a grassroots man. He's a self-made man. He's got money, but no talent.
I've been a good president, not a great one, but a good one.
Each one has at least one marvellous moment, and often more. I think that's what attracted me to it, was the conflicts between them.
Negotiating? No, not negotiating this bloody team without consulting me.
Every scene is an argument.
Get back
Talk
to
to
the
me
point,
like that,
Patrick.
You get back to
Calm down.
The entire movie is an argument.
It's no friend. We mean it.
President Truman.
You open on it and they're arguing.
What's the meaning of taking Jeff Hayward off? What's the meaning of you telling me how to run the game? I'm the president of this club, Laurie, and if I've got an opinion to express, I'll express it.
If they're not arguing to begin with, they begin arguing.
You were never known for your celibacy, mate. I can tell you.
Laurie.
It's this wonderful sort of orchestration of argument after argument.
Holy Jesus, Laurie, there's no need to be totally self-righteous. When a team is playing as badly as ours is playing, most coaches would be willing to accept some of the blame.
Wonderful stuff.
You just watch the way you speak to me in future, Parker, otherwise you'll end up getting flattened.
When I first saw the play and I suggested to Williamson that it would make a good film, I remember going through the text of the play and suggesting various places where things could shift. I said, look, the scene could break off at this point because films are different to plays. You can't do them the same.
Basically, Bruce said to David, you know, you've got to cut it by half, the dialogue by half, and leave all the jokes in it. And then the first draft we got was that David had cut it only by a quarter and had taken all the jokes out. And there was a very interesting meeting with David.
I think the play is funnier. The central scene is Jock and that joint he smokes. It's hilarious in the play, but it's not so hilarious in the movie. It's quite funny, but it's not that funny.
Oh, I think that's a complete load of codswallop. I think the film is a lot funnier than the play.
And I suppose that if a lot of people had seen the play, and a lot of people had, and then saw the movie, they would go along thinking it was going to be very, very funny, when in fact it wasn't very, very funny, the film. It was a bit black at times.
He's been up his mum and his legless sister and he thinks he killed his old man. What?
Every actor in the film was one I wanted. And they were all, you know, it was a bunch of my favourite Australian male actors of the period.
I won't be told how to do my job by the owner of some meat pie factory who's never played a game of football in his life.
The first time I ever saw Jack was in a film called The Family Man, I think. And I looked at it and I thought, that's the kind of actor I like. He's completely naturalistic, he doesn't overplay, and he's charismatic.
Now, if there's a pack forming to take a mark on the back line, there's got to be someone down the front to pick up the club.
When I was asked to play Laurie and took a look at Laurie, I began to take a look at the people whom he obviously represents. I don't know that he's drawn from them. Barassi was the most obvious at the time. The moustache I have is a Barassi moustache. It's a sort of a... there were others who wore moustaches like that at the time, but it was like the badge of office of a senior sportsman.
Jack really was very serious about the job that he had to do.
2 groups, 20 metres apart.
Being a coach, he had to be the front man, and I thought he did the job superbly for someone who didn't have a football background.
We've had the sports writers on our backs, telling us we're no good, that we're has-beens, hacks. Those bastards are going to choke on their words. Right, now get up there and get out.
I'd played a little bit of what was called Aussie Rules at school. I'd seen a bit of it when I'd been in Melbourne. But being a Sydney boy, it was not a part of my life. It became so much a part of my life that my wife wouldn't let me watch football on television.
Jack's wife came to me and said, "You've got to get this film over. I'm sick of having Ron Barassi living in the house."
For a couple of years after, I'd be saying, you stupid bastard, get it out, get it out. Oh, come on, that's not right. No. I couldn't see it without seeing it from that point of view.
You can achieve miracles in this world if you bloody want to. If you want to enough. Now, this is not beyond the stage of wanting. This is something that we have to do. Because if we don't, we won't be able to live with ourselves. We have to win. Okay? There are no prizes for second place. Now, all I want from you is everything you've got and more.
He was very, very much involved with the whole sink of football. He really got involved with everything from the coaching strategies to the game setups. You know, the whole thing about the football club. He absolutely loved it.
I love this club, and I love football, and I will not tolerate anyone who holds them both in contempt.
And I can remember, I think it was the first match of the year, I saw him standing in the queue to get in the football match. I thought, gosh, here he's been working with our players for so long, it's a wonder somebody couldn't have got him tickets, but he might have just been wanting to get the feeling of the football.
We started training here in Sydney. We started training with the Swans at first, so we did that for a couple of weeks. That was tough enough. But when we got down to Melbourne and started training on a daily basis with Hayfield, I can tell you, I have never been so fit in all my life, including years out in the bush and 6 years regular army.
And he'd do laps of the ground, and he'd go right over the corner of the ground, right over there, and he'd do his Tai Chi. And he'd be there for about a good hour doing what he normally does.
you know, at first we kind of wondered what he was doing, and then we found out he was meditating, doing yoga, and we kind of thought, you know, this is unbelievable for an actor and that.
I have to say, I start with a bit of Tai Chi, but then go with the players with seemingly endless jogs. I think we saw half of Melbourne, it seemed to me. They went on forever.
About time you caught a cab, Laurie.
They're professional sportsmen. For us to attempt to keep up with them, an actor keeping up with professional sportsmen, it's kind of unfair, really.
Where are your balls, man? What are you, a bloody poofter? Now look, you wake up to yourself or you'll play the rest of the game in a bloody dress.
Committee will stick by me to a man.
Want to bet?
Stake my life on it.
Then you're a dead man.
Graham, of course, was incredibly famous.
I must have been the only person in Australia who'd never heard of Graham Kennedy, because I'd been overseas for years and Graham was famous for doing a television show, but I had never seen it. And when I first saw Graham, he just read for me as an actor, and I said, yeah, he's good, he's funny, he's got good timing.
He can apologise or resign,
Look,
Jerry.
we're going to strike in.
Having a good time?
Good evening. Any player found guilty of a gross misdemeanour can lose every cent of his provident fund.
Bullshit.
That's true, isn't it, Jerry?
No. I was delighted with him.
It's really nice that he had a sort of humbleness about his acting, because he was a natural actor, but had never worked on stage at all. And so I always felt that perhaps he was not quite up to the mark, but he was so good.
He suffered from being, a TV personality who felt that that's what he was and that he couldn't really act. But, of course, Bruce knew that he could.
I think his performance is wonderful. I think it's very touching. I think he had a good understanding of it. He was a Melbourneite. He knew about football. I think he brought a lot to that character.
Where's all that spirit we had when I was elected last year? It can't have evaporated. Remember my election slogan, the great leap forward? Boom or bust? What happened?
We bust.
He was immensely professional, and the thing that I remember most about Graham was that he was absolutely obsessive about knowing his dialogue.
Oh, who gives a stuff what the public believes? The facts are, she called me a jumped-up little nobody and I slapped her. She egged me on all the way through her act. Laurie, you saw her. Practically rubbed her tits in my nose. When I went round backstage, she switched it all off and treated me like I was dirt under her feet.
I think one of the nicest scenes in the movie, and certainly one of the nicest scenes in my career as an actor, is the scene of the two of us looking out at the football field and him trying to convince me in that way that starts like, once again, an argument.
The fact that I will say that we can still keep working with each other will be virtually a retraction. No, it won't. All that means is that you still think I'm autocratic, but you're prepared to sit it out.
It begins in a sort of a wheedling way.
I've always been one of your greatest admirers. Do you remember your first kick? Not all that well. Oh, it was magic. I was standing on almost this exact same spot. I can see it as clearly as if it was a video replay.
And then he actually gets carried away with his own memory of it.
You read the play and started sprinting for the goal. Picked up a long, low pass from Wally Baker, did a beautiful blind turn around Stan Jackson, and slammed it through the centre. I go out on a limb and say it's the best first game that's ever been played on this ground. Thanks. No, I mean it. And I've seen every game this club's played since I was 6.
And it is, frankly, very touching.
If we won, I went home and booted a football around the backyard in the dark, trying to remember every kick of the match and pretending I was in the side. By the time I was 16, I could hardly hold my place in the school thirds.
It's an extraordinary piece. It's a wonderfully eloquent piece.
I would like to put fruitful and harmonious somewhere in our press statement, Laurie.
You're a trier. All right. Fruitful and harmonious. But that's it.
Great.
And he was just a pleasant bloke too to talk to. You get some people, I would believe, in the acting fraternity that don't talk to people and that, but he, fantastic. He really had a joke and a say with the players, and that he was fantastic.
And I always remember that Graham and I were actually having lunch one day sitting in the gutter outside the Collingwood Football Club, which he never let me forget.
We kept in contact for quite a long time, and he always used to put a cough, used to in brackets cough, because I put the cough in the scene where I was sacking him.
The reality is that we can't afford to jeopardise the credibility of the club by retaining a president who's erred in the way the public is going to think you've erred.
Because I just felt that it was one of those nervous things where you know you're going to do something really nasty. And I said to Bruce, I said, can I put a cough in there? And Bruce said, oh yeah. So Graham thought that was really clever. So he used to write something to me, and in the middle of a line he'd put in brackets, cough.
That's going to be your last year anyway, smart ass. We're getting ourselves a real coach around here next year, thank Christ, so stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Frank was another actor I'd always liked. I remember seeing Frank on stage in a musical called Lola Montez when I was at high school. And I thought he was a fantastic actor then. And I sort of locked away. I thought, oh, what an interesting actor that is. And then I sort of always kept track of him. And then when I got to be a director, I pounced on him.
Oh, a marvellous high mark you took last Saturday. Jeez, you just seem to go up and up.
Yeah, I felt like Achilles.
Yes. Who's he?
A Greek guy who could really jump.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of these new Australians. You know, they could be real champions if they forget about soccer and just learn to assimilate.
I think Frank may have created the role actually on stage, and I think he started probably to do the stage performance, which was too big.
You know them times when you're half a yard behind your man? He's going for the ball. Now, there's no way in the world you're going to stop him, right? Right.
His performance was somewhat theatrical.
Just as he leaves the ground, get your thumb, ram it up his bum.
Frank had sort of gone to his stage performance where he was talking about something, nothing, and we came to the end of it, and the scene, and Bruce said, yeah, da-da-da-da, to someone else, and this and that, and then he said to Frank, why are you talking like that? Frank said, talking like what? And he said, well, you know, nothing, I don't know, you're doing something peculiar. And Frank said, no, well, he's that sort of person. And Bruce said, what sort of person? He said, what do you know, he's an Australian. And it's a strong Australian accent. And Bruce said, what sort of accent do you think you have, Frank?
He's forever doing something that's absolutely against what Jerry wants him to do.
We are getting some great new players and a fantastic coach. Oh, shit! I shouldn't have said that.
There's a scene in The Office where Frank says, oh, the most outrageous thing at the wrong time.
How much did she want?
A lot.
$1,000.
$1,000.
And, you know, I feel like strangling him.
Beneath that rough charm of yours that has served you so well for all these years, Jock, old mate, there is a cunning and ruthless old turd.
When he had a funny part to play, he was hilarious, you know. I think that one when he was doing the smoking and things like that, it just cracked everyone up.
We'll have a nice little chat and a quiet smoke.
I got a couple here already to roll.
Oh, beauty. Good on you, son. Strong.
And the scene in the film where we all walk out onto the middle of Victoria Park, onto the Oval, and I am trying to talk Jack Thompson, the coach, round. I've got Frank with me, and Bruce said, look, play the scene, do the lines, but he said to Jack, you just interrupt and shout to the players whenever you want to.
Come on, Danny!
All right, if you really
Pull it up!
I never knew when I was going to be interrupted.
I've been courting a couple of big property developers.
Go on, Ronnie! Call out!
And so the whole thing was almost ad-libbed.
Come on, Danny!
Jock's point
Pick it up!
Is worth considering.
There comes this wonderful moment where Jock steps in and says the absolute wrong thing at the wrong moment.
What kind of money? Up to $500,000 each.
Plus some cash from our sales.
Loyalty to any one individual is a luxury we can't afford in a business with a multi-million-dollar turnover.
Cassell's a scarily good actor.
Well, who told the press?
God knows, we did everything possible to keep it quiet at this end.
I love the way he delivered dialogue, nice effortless way, full of innuendo. And of course he's playing the snakiest character in the club, and he does bring a very slithery, sinister quality to it.
If the feeling around the committee is that you should resign, Ted, it's not necessarily that we don't believe you're innocent.
You always seem to like the character you're playing, even though there's a lot about him that you wouldn't normally like in someone. But he knew what he wanted, and he knew how it had to be done.
There's no way in the world I'm going to resign.
Well, that's up to you, Ted. I'm sure the committee will back you if you decide to battle the whole thing through.
He's very much the businessman, and he actually says at the end of the film, I don't care about football.
I don't love this club. I don't particularly like the game.
he really cares about the business of football.
And that might make me an oily weasel in your eyes. But I happen to be the best football administrator in the country.
His insincerity, which was palpable.
There's a wonderful scene with Alan when Graham Kennedy finally accepts that he attempts to rescue his dignity and says, well, you're not getting rid of me.
No one's going to sack me. I've just resigned.
Barely holding himself together, and Alan comes up to him and says, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry this has happened, Ted. You have been a good president, and it certainly won't be forgotten.
The timing and the delivery is so... It's transparently insincere.
You fought to get me my job here, and I won't forget that either. I just hope that I can go on and do justice to the faith that you showed in me.
All the gesture and the face and everything appears to be sincere. I don't know how he has delivered. You'd have to analyse it again and again to find just where he's delivered that subtext of insincerity. But it's fabulous.
Look, if I'm going out there to risk a fractured skull or a ruptured spleen for the amusement of a pack of overweight drunks in the grandstand bar, then I want to get paid for it.
Oh, so that's what you think of your supporters, eh?
Harold I'd always liked as an actor. He was a good bit of casting for this player just on the edge of losing his place in the team.
By golly, he's out of form completely, and there must be a cloud over him.
Yeah, he's slowing down. How many kicks Danny had?
A bit old for a footballer.
Sorry, Laurie. Turned in a bad one today.
Again, he's got an interesting vulnerability about him.
Put me down the back pocket. I've been dying for a rest for years.
The scene in which he is hurt
You're 29 and slowing down. You only had 12 kicks and 4 handballs last week.
by the suggestion that he can't keep it up.
First time I've dropped under 20 disposals since the start of the season.
It's the first time you found yourself on a classy opponent.
Everyone gets beaten once in a while,
Danny,
Parker.
you played a good game. Now, don't let him needle you.
Is him at his best. It's fairly eloquent.
Well, what gives you the right to sit in judgment on me, you fat turd?
I don't think he was a natural footballer. I seem to remember doing a lot of kicking where he had to kick a great goal. To make him look like he could convincingly kick a football was pretty difficult.
You're in the big league now, Jeff, and you're scared. Scared you're not half as good a footballer as you bloody thought you were.
I think the only one that I didn't know was John Howard. That was a tricky role to cast because we had to get some very fit-looking young actor.
Right, fellas. This is our new boy, Jeff Hayward.
He was recommended to me by Michael Blakemore, the Australian theatre director who'd done a play with him, and he said, I think I know who you want for this. He said, we've got this young, good-looking chap, he's about 6'2", built like a brick Schüssenhaus. John Howard turned up and he fitted it perfectly.
Well, John Howard, I'd never seen him or heard of him, in fact, and he turned up the young, strong, the recruit. He looked the footballer.
He had to work very hard at being a footballer, but he didn't have to work very hard at being a very good footballer because you cut around all of that.
Out there and Adam, show 'em your might.
Yeah, they fitted into the mould of looking like a footballer at least, not necessarily they could have the skills, and that was evident in some of the film that we saw.
You know, you would think that you know, every person knows Aussie rules and they probably get a gist of how to play the game, but it was probably one of the hardest things we had to do, is to teach them to hold the ball, how to kick, how to handball, how to mark. They dropped more than they caught.
Real footballers, when they saw the movie, I shouldn't, is thought that some of the kicks weren't as good as they should have been.
Hey, Laurie, you've got the highest paid recruit in the history of league football coming out from under wraps. How will he go?
Laurie. I don't want to talk about the individuals, Lou.
And Lou was extraordinary, because when we went to do the commentaries, we used Lou, and like he said, absolute genius.
Let's see the start of the bounce again. There she goes.
And all we did was just show him the cut of the film and then gave him the numbers, and he just sort of worked it out.
The ball shot back up there towards that half-back flank. Hayward coming across, goes for the punch. It's a good one, but it's to the wrong man, and Carlton go back into attack again.
And he could integrate the real players with our fictional players.
Ray Shaw gives a nice hand pass over there towards Hayward. He's hopeless. He's even so frustrated he threw a punch at one of the Richmond players.
The play was set in Collingwood, and he really wanted to do it there, and also when we went to Melbourne and had a look at all the various clubs, it was the only club that retained all that tradition and the photographs on the walls and things like that. But we actually went to the VFL first to get permission, and I think that's really cemented it. That basically the VFL decided, probably sort of ordered Collingwood to help us.
Collingwood were a funny lot to deal with. I always felt we were in there a bit tenuously. They were somewhat odd. I mean, I remember one thing that struck me as very peculiar was that all around the walls of the boardroom were dozens and dozens of photographs of great players of the past. And I said to them, well, it'll be great to have these up there because, you know, they give so much atmosphere. And then they said to me, one of the Collingwood heavies said to me, oh, you can't photograph the photographs. I said, we can't? He said, no, can't photograph them. I said, well, we really need to photograph them. He said, well, what you can do is you can take copies of them and put them up. I said, well, that will be exactly the same as photographing them. He said, yes, but that's what you can do. So we had to get all these photographs down, do copies, frame them exactly the same, and put them back up. It always struck me as being very odd, but everything with Collingwood tended to be a little bit like that.
As an actor, it was great because you were in that location. There were photographs of footballers, and we had scenes in their gymnasium, you know, with the smell of a gymnasium, you know, and moving in that location all the time, you really felt part of the club. It felt real, and there's nothing like being in the true place.
You get the whole feeling of the club, what it's about. That's the club. What David knew of when he wrote the play is there all around you. Those walls covered in scrolls and photographs from the turn of the century, the sense of people coming and going, and the boardroom, the separation of it.
I was very stunned when I first saw the boardroom, and I said to Don McAlpine, gosh, I don't think we can stage so much of the film in here because it's so tiny. And he said, well, I don't know. He said, let's have a look at your storyboard. So I'd storyboarded a lot of the sequences. And he said, you know, I think we can do it because I can light it from outside. He said, it's tricky, but of course you have got the advantage that when you're looking back outside, you've got the huge window and you can see the ground. And he said, I think we can pull it off. And we did do it. It was extremely difficult.
Don used to get a bit exasperated with him sometimes. He'd say, oh, I should around here, do it this way. And Don would say, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't go across there. You know, he'd be crossing the line, or he'd be doing something, and Bruce would just say, "Oh yeah, it'll be all right," you know, laugh. I mean, considering he was making a major movie with a lot of money involved, he was pretty damn easy about it.
Jeff, I'm going to ask you for the first and last time for your help.
There's a scene where the camera actually is on a track that goes around it. I found that disturbing at first, but then you just ignore it and get on with it, and it has a very a totally acceptable and very real effect.
And if we win 12 out of the next 15, we can still make it to the finals.
The finals? You joke.
We can, especially if you start hitting your straps.
You're the coach.
this is a play that's then been taken out of the theatre and put on a football field and in rooms, and it does have a sense of constant movement to it.
We were always moving onto the ground or up the stairs or down the stairs and in the car. It was a very, very mobile sort of a movie.
Collingwood football team at the time had a great collection of characters. You know, people like Rene King and Ronnie Wearmouth.
I can remember Ronnie Wearmouth was a little dag, because he would be doing something which he wasn't supposed to be doing. When he wasn't supposed to be talking, he'd purposely talk, and they'd say, cut, this one's for Ronnie, and we'd go through the whole thing again. He did that on a lot of occasions.
And my role was to play the big tough roughy, sort of ogre of the club, and if there's any problems, you come and see Tank.
Jeff against Tank.
I hope he's insured.
He's the one that sort of biffed everybody and sorted everybody out. I think I had one line or something like that.
Suck.
Yeah, come on!
Yeah, he dropped the towel at one stage. That was part of the script.
You know, you're walking through a gate and all of a sudden he drops his towel and all you can see his bloody big bum sitting there.
If you want to call that acting, it was good fun.
Bruce Beresford just wanted us to be as normal as we could, which was pretty hard for people when there's all cameras around, a lot of people watching you.
Throughout the whole season we had cameras on us, match days and training days. And
Actually, to be quite honest, the entire day was a bit boring because it was so long.
I think it was about 6 o'clock in the morning we were asked to be there, Ronnie Wearmouth and myself, and I think we were in the bath, in the shower for, we had naturally nothing on, and you could just see my bum in the show. It took us 2 hours or something, and we were frizzled and cold by the time we finished that part of the scene. Yeah.
Bruce Beresford did have a good understanding of football. I think once again they do their homework.
My father was from Melbourne and was a complete fanatic. In fact, Australian rules football was the only thing he knew anything about. And he used to take me to the matches at Trumper Park from when I was about 4 years old.
Tom Hafey sort of ran the players. Bruce mapped out what would be shot, but Tom Hafey was sort of there in the background running it as a training exercise.
Jack and Tommy got together quite often and spoke about how they should play the role and how everything should be set up and so that Jack could look like a real football coach.
Now, there's no need to tell you that all the skill in the world isn't going to help you in this game unless you got one thing.
I just think that passion and emotion are just so important, and if you can get your team playing with that sort of an ingredient, skill and talent are only part of it, but if you're playing with terrific emotion and just feeling for the people, things like that, yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand how important that is.
Tommy made sure that Bruce Beresford understood how the mechanics of a football coach should work and a club should work.
We would have to set up the players who were in the finals, plus put in the Collingwood players, and then also put, obviously, Harold Hopkins and John Howard in. So a lot of people think, oh, I can't remember those two players, but they remember the rest of them.
The football scenes were tricky because we had to put real actors playing the game. Harold Hopkins and John Howard were in there in the team. And what we did was we filmed real matches with the Collingwood Football Club playing various other teams, and then we did intercut shots with our players.
We actually filmed between two grand finals. The first grand final we shot there, I think we had about 4 cameras and things covering it, getting grand final footage of our own. Because we needed it on 35mm, we couldn't use other footage. And of course it's pre-CGI days, so we couldn't use any of that. It all had to be in-camera technique.
We had photographs of people up in the stand with scarves around their neck, so there was a bit of movement.
And in fact, I think I borrowed some of these spectators from another film called The Games, and they were all mocked up in wood, and we set them up in the stands.
I mean, you couldn't hold the shots too long because you could see it was fake, but I think we got away with it okay.
That's Danny Rowe having a long shot for goal, and what a goal, and so he should be away. 70 metres out from goal, can he make the distance? I think he can because he's a true champion. He fires, and look at that ball. Oh, yes, it's a goal right through the middle. What a champion as he fixed up the knockers. Thank God I wasn't one.
It stands up very well as a piece of David's, as a piece of mine, as a piece of Bruce. I think it's a very funny and somehow absurdly touching look at who we are.